medical genetics at Oxford, and I'm sure that there are an abundance of skills that can transfer over from doing any PhD, really, just from the level of intelligence that you need to be able to do that, which amazes me. But at what point was it during your PhD? Was it afterwards? At what point around that time did you decide to transition into cyber?
So I actually didn't decide to transition into cyber after during my PhD, or even sort of after it. I had to make a bit of a pivot because I have very sensitive skin. And when I was doing my PhD, I developed pretty bad eczema, and because initially my first sort of project was in biosafety containment level 3 lab. So there's a lot of very regimented hygiene regime, and I was just not handling it. So I think I initially actually made a pivot towards bioinformatics because that seemed to be the most sort of logical kind of move. And I was, when I was doing my PhD, my PhD was in medical genetics. It was very much I very much leaned toward the analytical side of it. So I lean towards the statistics. I sort of like the data because it can give you so much insight. So it was a relatively easy transition. Unfortunately, I think when I finished that master's, I think it was just wrong time in the cycle, in the sort of, because you always get cycles of peaks and troughs. And they sort of the companies basically said, oh, if you want to do bioinformatics, we want you to have a PhD in bioinformatics. And actually, I was offered to do a PhD in bioinformatics by the supervisor I did my master's with. I was like, but no, I think one's enough.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I did actually walk into Cisco in technical consulting with my eyes sort of open, because I think at that time I was still very much sort of very academic mindset, training, learn more and stuff. And the program that I joined, effectively they trained you up, so you didn't really have to have any experience. It was very intensive. You have to work hard. But one of the things is I'm quite geeky, so I think there's no. I don't think I would have, it would have been a technical discipline regardless, right? So, but I'm also quite outgoing. So, when I was doing, it was quite embarrassing actually. When I was doing my master's, my supervisor kept seeing me in the student cafeteria, often having a coffee or something with somebody else. And she was like, you're very social. So I was just, when she said that, I sort of thought, what can I do that allows me to sort of have the sort of still being a nerd, but useful, but also allow me to have that social interaction that I like. So technical consulting was it. So so that's how I sort of moved into technical consulting. And then, it was Cisco, so it's networking. And then it was a new area effectively. And I sort of realized, hang on a second, all of these protocols are designed, with connectivity in mind. It's not safety and not security. And it was designed at a time where not as many devices were connected. So I think security is going to be pretty interesting arena. And also a lot of the sort of analytics and technical detection tools that's still using cyber. It's the similar kind of tools that I used in medical genetics and bioinformatics, computational biology. So that's what made it's quite an eclectic career.
Yeah, and I think it's really good from Cisco that they kind of, as part of their hiring process, they kind of looked outside the box, because I think a lot of companies struggle with their kind of hiring plans or the skill shortage that there is. I think it's so important to kind of look outside what you would see as kind of the more normal route to come into kind of that level of job and things like that. So I think it's really kind of forward thinking from them, because obviously we see it now that people are looking for different skills and, allowing people to cross skill into that. But I think for them to do it at that point, I think it's really forward thinking. And
I think so. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I mean, just to sort of, just to be clear, I think most of the folks who apply for that program, and I was, I'm such a sort of, it was like an assessment day, as they put us in a hotel the night before. So while we're waiting for the taxis to pick us up, to take us to the sort of assessment day, I basically did a round around the at the lobby, and it's like, oh, what's your background? Because we were waiting right as well. And most of them were sort of network communications, mobile communications. So, but it was, I think they did take a risk with me, and I'm very grateful for the fact that they did it, because actually I think it's just perfect, because it allowed me to be nerdy but in a useful way, and also to sort of have that customer interaction, which I really enjoyed, that social interaction. I know it's not quite the same as sort of a normal kind of go out with your friends type thing, but it's
skills that, I think it's good to use your strengths in a certain role. So why wouldn't you? And I listened to another podcast that you did, and you admitted in that podcast that a slight part of you subconsciously, maybe you did the PhD to fulfill kind of expectations and pressures that was there subconsciously, that were placed on you, whereas you chose cyber as like your personal passion at the time. And I just wondered, like, was there any other, when you were sort of, before you did your PhD, was there any other career that you considered, or was it always going down the kind of medical genetics route?
So my dad's a medic, so the expectation
in the back of your mind now,
so the expectation, well, he really wanted me to do medicine, right? So and of course, don't want to go into stereotyping, but obviously he was, and my mom did chemical engineering or something, so they're both techs, they're both nerds, so it's I'm kind of going the right path. But I could not, I barely cook meat at this point in, I think I cooked meat probably about 3 times in my life. I just can't handle it. And I was just like, there's no way I can do the training. So he was like, okay, if you're not doing if you're not going to do medicine, then I think you should do a bit more education than 3 years. So he was like, I think I kind of, I think you should. He recommended that I do a PhD. And to be honest, I think for my sort of academic year, I was quite young anyway, and I wasn't sure whether I wanted to be sort of going to the workplace, at 21.
Yeah. That's so young when you look back now, like 21.
I know.
What do you even know when you're 21?
I mean, well, we thought we knew it all, didn't we? So it's just we were like, what's going on? So, but I think it's partly, but I'm actually very grateful for that sort of expectation, because I think it does, the actual PhD did give me a lot of training. It gives me, so you work exceedingly hard. Well, with a lab-based PhD, and for most PhD, you work exceedingly hard. You do your lab work during the day, and then in the evening you read. And you sort of learn to absorb a large amount of information, learn to pivot, and learn to apply your skills. You get a lot of critical thinking skills, obviously, and lots of the analytical skills and the techniques that's used for the PhD. But one of the things that's really good is, I don't think I was I think the actual process of writing the thesis and papers improved my sort of ability to write. I don't think I was as good at writing as before I'd done it. So it gave me a lot of kind of live skills, transferable skills. And anyway, they Medical Research Council sponsors me. So it was like, thank you very much. It's the equivalent of a job. So, but no, I'm glad of that expectation, I think. And it gave me more skills than I realized at the time. Because when I had to make the initial pivot, I was like, so spent a lot of time on this, lots of effort, invested a lot of emotions in.
Yeah, I guess nothing to waste of kind of time or anything though, because there's always a lesson to be learned, especially with something like academia. Like, you're investing so much into your future no matter what happens. So I think it's, there's always a lesson learned and something to be taken out of it.
I think so. And I think one of the things is I don't think I work hard during my PhD for most of the time. I don't think I worked as hard during my undergraduate, and I think that's a good training, because just prepare and train yourself to be able to do that if necessary. It's going to help you with whatever career you're going to go into, particularly in technology when things change so quickly.
Yeah, they do. It's crazy. And this whole kind of interview series that we do is about inspiring change. And I know that you've done a lot of work around kind of diversity and representation within the industry. And I just wanted to ask you, as the final question, part of this interview, is what lasting impact do you want to leave to inspire change and the people within this industry?
So I hope we can be more collaborative. I think I very much, I hope I brought some of the academic kind of mentality into the industry, where, you sort of, if you are fortunate enough to get the opportunity to do something, you share the experience so that others can learn from you. And hopefully that will help us move the industry sort of along a bit, because we still, I think, one of the difference between sort of white hats and black hat is, I think there's in a way more collaboration in the sort of black hats community. So I hope I'm sort of I sort of able to sort of leave that, as it were, to bring that into the sort of that mentality into the industry. I think I hope I manage to sort of help people along the way. I think it is actually a privilege to have the skill sets or knowledge to help somebody, and that is quite rewarding kind of thing to do. So I hope I sort of brought that collaborative mindset and sort of able to help some folks or companies along the way.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is a privilege to obviously have that platform and that knowledge, but I think it's obviously what you do with that and who you share and who you help along the way that kind of hopefully inspires that change.